Glad to see you out, and we are expecting more. And we are looking forward to really getting some good information this evening. So, before we begin this most wonderful program, let us bow our heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for every seat that's here on Zoom that has been taken up. We're so glad for every mind and heart that feels the presence of this Zoom room. Only you truly know what we are setting about to accomplish. We have ideas, we have visions, we have hints, but Lord, you know our talents and our abilities, and you can take that and shape it into what it needs to be. So, God, we're depending on you this evening to open up our eyes and minds to all the possibilities. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Okay, this is a little bit different for me. I'm used to coming to your church and dealing one-on-one. I said, so this may sound a little bit different. I guess to start out, back in February, we all realized that we were going to have to do something different. And none of us had any way of doing that yet. We had probably talked about it in many meetings, whether we should go online or not, but most everybody didn't do that. There were a few people online, yes. So the first thing that everybody would have used would have been their phone or possibly an iPad. And there were ways you could mount that on a tripod and just have a dead shot of the room. Depending on your phone, depended on how good an image it was. If it was a newer phone, you could get a pretty good image. If it was an older phone, it was probably pixelized, and not many people would have wanted to watch it. The other problem with using a phone was audio. The only audio source you had was the microphone in the phone, and that didn't prove to work real well. A lot of people went to putting a laptop on the pulpit and literally preaching to a laptop camera, which works pretty well. But that's all you're going to get is the sermon and prayers that the pastor is doing. You're not getting any of the music. You're not getting any of the other participation. So a lot of people went to recording services, and actually a lot of people went to just recording the sermons, and they would post their sermons online, and that was it. Well, as the pandemic grew and got longer, people realized, wow, this isn't going to work. We need to do more. And then came the thoughts of getting back into church in June. Well, and then we found out that after we sectioned our sanctuaries off, we couldn't fit very many people in our sanctuaries. And then if you listen to the CDC's mandates, you couldn't sing. You couldn't even have a choir unless they were more than 12 feet away from anybody. It was even difficult for some pastors because they were preaching in masks, which is what you were supposed to do. But audio was an issue because masks muffle audio. Whether you're using a phone or your computer, it didn't really matter. So everybody started scrambling to find equipment. It was all sitting in China on a dock because of all the regulations about shipping and all. Vendors couldn't get it here. So we were all kind of scrambling to find stuff to use. So first, to stay with the basics, the iPhone or the iPad, I'm going to go over here and grab something. There was a piece of equipment that came out called an iRig. Yeah, this isn't going to look very well. An iRig Stream. This comes in many different models, and it will connect. It'll plug right into your phone. It'll plug right into your iPad or your computer. It comes in a whole lot of different configurations. And they were great, except you couldn't get them. The few that were around went pretty quick. So, but that is a solution if anybody's still having issues. So we started looking for different platforms, different ways to do this, different ways to get the message out. Some churches are using Zoom, use Zoom, and they still are using Zoom. Alan Morrison is using Zoom very successfully, where he even has a greeting time before the service starts that people can talk to each other and socialize on Zoom. And they do that every Sunday still, even when they were back, they were doing that. And it was very successful. And I know that other churches have done that also. It wasn't just Alan.
Bill?
Yes.
Before you move too much further, we have a question about the iRig. Will you have time for that later, or should we pause and let folks ask about that while we're here?
We can talk about it now.
Okay. The question is whether that device increases the sound.
Yes, it does have some control on it. You can raise or lower the sound, because in some instances, you need to lower what's coming into your computer. Some mixing boards are not putting out a low enough input, so you have to boost it, or they're putting out a too high of an input, so you have to lower it. Otherwise, it's garbled. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Are there
Any other?
how much?
Just for reference, they run about between, say, $75 and $125.
We used the iRig pre with our iPad, and it took out static out of our line, and we were able to hear better, a lot more clear with that.
Yeah, audio has been a big issue all across the board. We might as well talk about audio for a minute. If you were like our church and decided we were going to stream everything, including a praise band or an organ, we didn't really have much of a choir, so usually some of the choir members joined the praise band. But what we found was we had a terrific mix in the sanctuary. But when we went to put that mix out into the computer and then send it to Facebook or send it to YouTube, they all have their own little compression tools that they use that totally change your audio. Mostly they cut out the highs, they cut out the lows, but they're different, because your audio can sound great and nice and loud on one, usually Facebook, and YouTube, it'll be significantly lower. So if you're doing a multicast situation, you might get some complaints about that. We had significant complaints about that. And all the different streaming platforms have their own issues along with audio, especially the free ones, because they want to limit the bandwidth that you're using. And that's how they do it. They cut your signal down. Any other audio questions while we're talking about it?
Is there any way to address the variation across platforms?
No, what we've found is you kind of get the best sound you can for the lowest platform and then work from there. We primarily use Vimeo. We pay $900 a year to use Vimeo because Vimeo puts out a really good product compared to the other ones, the free ones. And we have a little more control over that. And then we share it from Vimeo to Facebook and to YouTube. So you have a little more control at that point.
Bill, it's Jim Parkinson. Is it okay if I interject something on the subject of audio?
Absolutely.
Okay. It was, Bill, speaking of one approach to that, we just work with Facebook, and we stream to Facebook, and in our case, we upload to YouTube after the fact. Streaming to multiple services at one time, requires a fair amount of bandwidth, or you have to use another service to restream. Our thoughts were, we're willing to spend first money, but we have no interest in operating cost. So anything that has a monthly fee or an annual fee, we prefer to try to stay away from. And the advantage of streaming to Facebook is there is no cost to stream to Facebook.
Right.
As far as audio goes, there's no question. Audio is the thing that messes everybody up. The first mistake, fortunately, most churches have some kind of a soundboard of some sort. And if you have a soundboard, you're going to have a different mix for what you're going to feed to the stream than what you have for the room. The other one is, of course, you have to remember the stream only hears what's being picked up by a microphone somewhere. The room, of course, has its natural acoustics. You can have things in the room that have no microphones at all, and people in the room have no problem hearing it, but you won't hear any of that on the stream. So the most common mistake people make when they first start streaming is they just assume whatever audio mix I have, I'm feeding to my speakers up front, I'm going to feed to my stream and everything will be great. And it isn't. It won't be great. There'll be all kinds of stuff you're missing. So the first thing is, if you do have an audio board, most audio boards do have what are called aux outputs. If you're fortunate enough to have one that has that, then you're going to want one of your aux outputs to be making a mix for the sake of the stream. In our case, we have two different places we're doing this at. In each case, existing audio boards had that ability, and we did that. So I know audio is by far the biggest stumbling block to everybody I know who's streaming. I don't know anybody who starts out that doesn't have terrible audio, and audio is an ongoing problem. Running cameras and streaming is duck soup compared to mixing audio that can go out. Like this past Sunday again, I mean, we started out, we did our normal sound test, and I stepped up, and in 10 seconds, there's people feeding back on Facebook. They can't hear anything. Fortunately, we had somebody there that was smart enough to realize what was wrong. But the other dilemma in all of this is there's just so many ways you can do the same thing. I know what we do. I know what a few other people do. I know Bill knows a lot of ways of doing things. But the truth of the matter is there's almost an infinite number of ways to accomplish what you're trying to do. So what you're left with is, okay, what is it that you yourself can do, knowing what you know, knowing what equipment you have, knowing what little bit of money you got to spend, and therein lies the trick. I'll shut up now.
Thank you. I'm going to let Laura go because I know she has another meeting to go to. So I'm going to let her kind of give their little story about what they did and how they started out.
Thanks, Bill. So we're down in Washington district, and I have two smaller churches. And initially, well, I should probably say I'm Laura Sappel. I serve these two little churches in Washington, Amity and Liberty. And when this first happened, we had done occasional live streaming just at Liberty, and it was with a phone, and it was from the back. And we just did it like occasionally. We were playing with the technology just to see what we could do. So it was not real consistent. It just depended on what we had at the time. And there were times I had an older iPhone, and so it didn't always like to cooperate. So it was just one of those things. It's not essential, but it's something that we're playing with. And then when that first Sunday in March came that we needed to be recording, there were four of us that got together to do the recording. And we used the person who had the best iPhone among us. And then we figured out about iRig early on, and we were fortunate enough, blessed enough that we were able to order an iRig and get it. And it really made a big difference. And you kind of have to download an app on your phone, which I can do like nobody's business. But we had a millennial, and she downloaded it onto her phone, and we were able to do that. And that helped to fix a lot of the audio challenges. But we would pre-record and then upload. But we actually did some video editing. So we would put words to the music, and we put the scripture on. We were just able to do that. And how we were able to do that is Google. We're just like, how do you do this? Let's figure this out. And then, you know, we're figuring that out. So every week through that was just another layer of, okay, what other thing do we need to learn? So that by the time we were talking about reopening, it was going to be toward the beginning of July. And we'd reached out to Bill probably in May, pretty sure it was May. He came down and looked at the one church just to figure out, you know, what can we do? And it turns out we had an awesome mixer, and we didn't know it because it was like shoved in some cupboard somewhere that got used, but all they did was turn it on. And then it was in a cupboard, and it didn't slide out, so no one could use any of the knobs and stuff. So we went and got a desk. I'm an office supply queen, so we were able to get just the right thing and got just got everything set up. We went less expensive. You can spend a whole lot more on something that's lockable. Ours does not lock. I just figure, if you're willing to brave the pandemic and come out and be masked, I don't think you're going to think about stealing stuff or messing with their knobs. Now, when we're back in full worship, we'll need to figure that out a little bit more. But I think the whole thing just scares people, and they don't want to go near it because then they might be asked to help with it. So at this point, we just have a good, nice, cheap desk that contains everything. We were able to pull out the stuff that we had, realize what we didn't have, and we had Bill come down, who was just phenomenal because he just was very patient and said, "Oh, this is really good, and you have great microphones." Oh, that's good. Good to know. So we were learning about what system we had and then what we needed. And so we just went ahead and spent the money. I'm blessed enough to be serving churches that have had some money in the bank that was not going to hurt us to go and spend some money. And if it would enable us to reach out to more people, then we were willing to spend the money. And then there were some people that just gave directly to technology so that we could do that. And that was before we ever knew about a technology grant. So we were able to do stuff and began the second Sunday in July. The first Sunday was the 4th of July. And I thought, we're not trying this on a 4th of July weekend. So we did it the second Sunday in July. And everything came in at the right time, but every week, just to last week, just yesterday has been a learning experience. Like we had to learn and tweak and figure out and stuff. So my husband's been amazing. He's retired and works for me. So that's what he tells people. So he's in the tech chair and he's had lots of conversations with Bill. And there's another service that's really great called Church Front. I don't know if you've heard of that, but I get emails from that and Jarrett does, and they have training on how to do things. I have these two small churches and I'm amazed at the technology we've been able to go ahead and get. We've put TVs up so that the TVs can show all of the lyrics and scripture and the calls to worship and all of that stuff, which means that I'm typing up 4 PowerPoints every week. It's just the reality of the new thing that is part of my routine. But we're not using bulletins, we're not using hymnals. So then what do? You have to write up the PowerPoint. So copy and paste is my friend, and every once in a while I get creative. There's another thing that I use called Canva, which means you can kind of create your own art and your own slides and your own stuff and make it your own. And that's been really good. But we actually, down at the little church that never did not have internet, we actually got them to get internet by the beginning of September. And we were able to replicate a lot of the things that we were doing at the one church at the other church. And that has worked very well. We upgraded the internet at Liberty. And so right now at 11 o'clock, we don't have any difference between audio and video. Like my lips are saying what they're supposed to say at the right time. At Amity, for some reason, at 9:30, it's always delayed. And I'm thinking, why wouldn't it be delayed at 11? Why is it being delayed at 9:30? So then my husband's trying to figure out and read and Google and try to figure stuff out. It has been quite a challenge for us, but we've been able to meet a lot of that challenge. And it's been such a blessing, especially to the people in their 90s who have figured out how to pick up their remote control and talk into the remote control and say, Amity United Methodist Church, and it takes them on YouTube, and it takes them right there. And I, taught them how to subscribe, and so they are able to watch that. Now, I have to tell you, yesterday was a total different thing that happened that we had to deal with, and that's that we had ice down here. So I spent 11 years living in Alaska. So really, most of this stuff is like, please, why are we canceling school? I mean, just my whole attitude is that way. Just because we can drive in anything, it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's like Pennsylvania in the 70s. It's fine. But it was just ice. So I did the rare thing of canceling church. And then I'm like all dressed and ready to go. Everything is an icy mess. I'm like, what are we going to do? We've got to cancel church, which we have never done. So then we came into this room here, which is my war room / office. I hooked up the PowerPoint, downloaded it so that I could show that through Zoom while streaming onto YouTube at the same time. We don't use Facebook because most of our people don't use Facebook. They have a thing about social media, which is not a bad thing. So that's what we did, is we streamed.
I'll make a comment on that so people know. You do not have to join Facebook to be allowed to watch a Facebook Live presentation.
Right.
Okay, most people get very confused there. You do not have to join Facebook to be able to watch Facebook Live.
Yes, that's true, but they don't want to do anything with Facebook. Like trying to teach one piece of technology is hard enough. And that's absolutely true. You can use Facebook, you can use YouTube and other things. The hard part, well, I think the key for us is just being consistent and helping people to know, okay, this is where you're going to find it every single week. So this past week, I just sent out a thing and I was able to do live on each of the YouTube channels for each of the churches. And we did it right from here. And so I sat down while preaching a sermon, which is another thing I'd never done. It was Zoom, it was interactive, it was fun. It went better than I thought it was going to go. But I just feel like the whole thing is blessed are the flexible, for they will not be bent out of shape. Because it just seems like there's going to be another hiccup, another thing that you have to learn, another thing that you're going to have to adapt to. But my people have been awesome, because even though they might say, well, the audio wasn't great or this wasn't right, they always say, we appreciate everything that you're doing. And I'm glad that you are figuring something out for us so that we can gather together and be connected. So I just have great people that are not whiny about that. They have just been really wonderful and encouraging as we're trying to figure all of this stuff out. So that's
Laura,
it in a nutshell. Yep.
Laura, question for you, okay? You had
Mhm.
mentioned that you had upgraded the internet service at one of your churches.
Yes.
Now, this is a technical question. If you don't know the answer, that's fine. Do you know what your upload speeds are on your upgraded service?
35, I believe, 35 to 40. The download.
If you're 35 megabits per second, you have one of the fastest upload speeds imaginable. So.
Yes, and we decided to go big. But one of the frustrations is that if you had, we can't get Verizon where we are. We have AT&T, so not AT&T, but Comcast Xfinity, and they are actually we maxed out on them. But if we had Verizon has like 100 up,
Right. I know in a lot of more rural locations, it is a problem. First thing is, generally live streaming, attempting to use Wi-Fi is not a wise idea. And when you're doing it from your phone, odds are you're actually doing it through your carrier. But most people, the reality is, if you happen to have internet service at your church, the first question is, does it have sufficient, everybody talks about download speeds. That's how they advertise the internet. But the reality is, to stream, it's upload speeds. Right. You can get 100 megabits per second download speeds on all kinds of services. But getting yourself, you need at least 6 megabit per second upload speed. And there's lots of stuff out there that can't do that. We
hardwired in.
That's correct. You need a hardwire connection is by far the best way to do this. But I just know the very first question anybody has to ask themselves if they're going to stream is, do you have an internet connection that's sufficient to do this? And unfortunately, many churches don't.
So we have had to do some upgrading, and that does mean that we're paying monthly for something. Like Amity didn't have internet at all. So then we upgraded them. So they're at like 20 or 25. But I think the reason the audio and video are still off is because our speed is not high enough for what we want to do at that time.
Yeah, the audio and video syncing problems are not associated with your upload speed. It's associated with the way that you're putting the two together in the first place. That's why you have a thing called a video mixer. And what a video mixer does is it's concerned about syncing the audio and the video. So I'm saying you're dealing with issues that are associated with what you're sending out. It's not your upload speed that give you the lag between your audio and video. It's actually what you're putting it out with.
Yeah.
Well, it works great, except for 9:30 on Sunday mornings, because we've tested it at all kinds of other times, but like 9:30 on Sunday morning, and it's not working well. Well, it's been great to see you all and to chat with you. I'm about 10 minutes late to another meeting, so I gotta scoot for now. But if anybody wants to chat or talk or anything, I'm happy to talk about it. We're like in this club of no one knows exactly what they're doing, and we're all in this together. So good luck to everyone.
Thanks, Laura. Keep on keeping on.
Yep. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah, that's pretty much the first question I ask when someone asks me about streaming is, what do you have for internet? Because that's a big thing. Um, the one church I went to, they had DSL. It was the lowest speed DSL that was ever out. They were paying $380 a month. They upgraded. The person they talked to at Verizon just laughed because they didn't even know anybody was still using it. Well, they upgraded to Fios, and they're paying $80 less a month now than they were paying before. So it really pays to look and see what you have. And I know it's hard for pastors. When you come into a church, you're kind of, you don't know everything that exists. You don't get all that information. But if you're getting into streaming, it's a question you want to ask your trustees or whoever, because it's going to shut you down real fast. I did an event for Wesley Woods from the Corey, Pennsylvania, PA church. All afternoon, I test streamed, no problem. 6 o'clock that night when we went to start, I was on the air for 10 seconds and it shut us down. Well, Corey has a very low bandwidth and not a lot of signal because there's no industry there really. Everybody comes home from work, they get online, and it just shut us down. So it can be tough. Now,
So Bill and Jim, could you summarize what people should look for when they're looking at their internet service?
I can make a suggestion, okay? If you do have internet, there's an application. It's available no matter what you're using. You can do it on your phone. You can do it on your iPad. You can do it on your computer. It's called Speed Test.
yeah,
So go to wherever you get apps, pull it down. Bill, if you'll enable me to screen share, I can show you Speed Test.
Jim, I think you should be able to. Go ahead.
Okay, so can you see that there sits Speed Test? I'm happen to be at home, so this is not going to actually be adequate for anything. But I'm running Speed Test, and you can see it'll tell you a ping speed. Don't worry about that. It'll tell you this wonderful download speeds. Who cares? Because you're worrying about uploading. And once it gets past that, then we'll get to upload speeds, which are the thing that really matters. And now comes upload speeds. Now I'm at home on a Spectrum internet service, and this would not be able to stream anything. Okay, you can see I'm at 1.75 megabits per second. This is not an uncommon kind of thing to have in tons of churches. Would be something just like this. This wouldn't work for streaming. But that gives you the example of what that is. And as I said, if you got an internet connection, get a hold of Speed Test. You'll find out what your upload speeds are. Bill might be able to help here. I know generally, if you want to go up at 720p, you need at least 4 megabits per second. The truth of the matter is, numbers more like 9 actually are probably more realistic. Now, we got fortunate because prior to pandemic, we were streaming. And when we first started, we basically were only uploading to YouTube because we just didn't have anything that was adequate and were unwilling to spend any more money a month than we were spending, which was already $260 a month. And one day I walk out and VNet is laying fiber by the church. And I walk up to the guys and they said, yeah, you'll be hooked up tomorrow. And the next day my speed was 19 megabits per second and we didn't have to pay anything. So that was fortunate. Now, that's the first thing you got to think about is what do you have for an internet connection, and do you have any upload speed that might allow you to to stream.
Now, Jim, is that through cable or phone?
This is cable.
Cable, okay. Because one thing you will also find out is cable rates their stuff different than phone. Than
That's
like
correct, they do.
cable company, they use a higher number than what the phone companies use. And actually, it's the same. It's just how they classify theirs. What she's saying is 35. If you're looking at Verizon, it's probably 9 or 10, like you were saying, Jim. So that's how the cable companies, one of the ways they get over on you a little bit. But and the other thing we've noticed is that we're on between 9 and 11 on Sunday mornings. And we have had this year alone, well, we've had twice where our cable has gone down. Our Xfinity has gone down. And I've checked, there's a national website you can go on about cable drops. And there'll be little red spots all over actually it's all over the world, because whether you have Verizon or Xfinity, they don't own their own internet. They use a provider also. So if that provider goes down, then everybody goes down. And that Sunday morning over Pittsburgh was a big red dot. And it only lasted about an hour, and then it was back, it was fixed.
One reality at the moment is churches have actually become a very significant load on the internet on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
Now, as I say, we were streaming prior to the pandemic, and you know, at that point, we would, as I say, we would upload offline to YouTube, and I could upload a hour-long service and do it in maybe 20 minutes. Since the pandemic, it usually takes 2.5 hours to do the exact same thing. It gets better the later you get into Sunday afternoon. But the reality is there are so many churches streaming that it does actually have an impact on the internet's capacity. Welcome to the realities of where we're at.
Yeah. Before we go further, is there any other questions for right now?
Bill, we've got some in the chat. The first one was from a while ago, actually, from Bruce, talking about audio. He said, is the best plan to run the auxiliary out into another mixer to mix it before it runs into the laptop that runs Zoom and Facebook Live?
That depends upon the kind of audio panel you have. Some audio panels, the auxes each have their own ability to, to create a custom mix for the aux right on the panel. I know the ones that we were dealing with, which are old ones that were already there, had that ability. Now, if you have one of these new fancy digital things, you just take the digital stuff that you're putting into one mixer and you just feed the exact same thing to another mixer, and you make that mixer be for your stream and the other mixer be for your room. But I said the majority, if you're stuck with an old analog mixer, which is what you usually run into in churches, most of those, if they do have aux outputs, there won't be the big slider knobs on the bottom. There'll be little knobs up top. But those little knobs will allow you to create a custom mix for the stream. And but yeah, I mean, you absolutely positively have to have a different mix for the stream than you have for the room. In our case, we actually I have 4 different mixes we deal with, because we also broadcast to radio, which is a whole nother story. We've been doing that for 30 years, and as well as podcast stuff. So all I know is the biggest mistake people make is to think that you can just take the audio you got and it's going to be fine. It sounds good in the room, will be great on the stream, and that's just not true.
On the digital boards today, you can build a second output on another slider, in a sense, and that can be your stream feed, and it'll be totally different than what you have in your church. You can customize it, you can change the effects, you can do everything on it. But
Was
yeah.
it Behringer 32s are probably the most common digital boards going in churches at the moment. If we had it to do again today, that's what we would be doing, but you know, we don't.
That's what I'm using. And it'll give you, you know, it allows you to have a totally separate mix. And you can do 8 of them. So anything else?
Could one of you drop the name of that into the chat so that if folks want to write down, they can see it in front of them? The other question, Bill, is about licensing, and you might give a quick answer here if you know, and then I will also let you all know that on March 8th, Monday, March 8th, we're going to do a separate conversation specifically focused on licensing and copyright with some copyright attorneys who have been doing some research on that for us specifically, because it is such a frequently asked question. And I wasn't able to find a really comprehensive resource out there. So the annual conference has commissioned some folks to work on that for us. So more detail coming, but Bill, the question is whether you can give YouTube your CCLI and one license information ahead of time so they won't challenge the music in your videos.
YouTube could care less about your licenses. You're never going to be able to talk to them about any of that stuff.
YouTube.
You can be perfectly legal and they don't care.
Yeah, YouTube this past week shut our broadcast down and deleted our account. And trying to, and I do that. We, you know, I giving them our information ahead of time. It doesn't matter. Jim's right. And
Bill, do you know what it was you were doing that you think triggered that? Because we've become very good at knowing what we can get away with and what we can't.
no, I don't. And I've sent them letters asking what we did, and they have yet to respond.
The number one mistake that people make is to use pre-recorded tracks. I don't care whose pre-recorded track it is. Okay. I got a little rule of thumb. All right. 20 seconds or less, and you'll get a copyright hit, but you won't get blocked.
Yeah.
Go over 60 seconds, you're blocked and knocked down. I mean, your account shut down. All right. So the first thing is, under no circumstance do you want to use pre-recorded tracks, period. I don't care what license you have. I don't care if you have, you know, from that publisher, a license saying you're allowed to do this. YouTube and Facebook will knock you down and shut you down. And no amount of anything with them is going to change. They have computer algorithms that are watching this stuff, and there's no people involved, and you will never talk to a person. So remember, you know, the bottom line is don't use pre-recorded tracks, period.
Well, we don't use them, and I'm still kind of frustrated over it. Now, I had a challenge from somebody from YouTube. Now, this is almost a year ago, about a Wesley hymn. They said that we had taken it from a German symphony.
Yeah.
And so I sent them back all the copyright information on the hymn, a picture of the hymn page out of the hymnal and everything else, and I got an apology letter back. But since then, no matter what it is, the file isn't even totally loaded yet, and I already have complaints from YouTube. But they shut us down, so you know, I can't get any answers from them.
Now, okay, I am never able to do a YouTube upload that does not have copyright strikes. Okay, you will get a copyright strike on any music you use.
Yep.
Even when you're performing it yourself. And all that does is it prevents you from monetizing. Okay, you're not allowed to make money. If you were making money, it would go to whatever copyright holder's claiming it. And of course, what'll happen if you sing a praise and worship song, there'll be 6 copyright holders claim it. None of them could possibly all have the copyright at the same time. But since you're not trying to monetize, you spend no time worrying about that kind of thing. That's not going to stop you from putting out what you want. Might stop you from, by the way, Denmark's the most common country they'll block you from. I don't know why. But when you do this long enough, you get used to seeing all of that kind of stuff, and you sort between what matters and what doesn't. And you know, we're to the point now, it's probably less than once a year that we'll actually have something get blocked. So and I'd love to say that I could give you this perfect rule on how to do it. I don't know. It's just a sixth sense that you begin to develop after you've done it a while.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to wait for that, that next talk on that, because, you know, whatever I could say tonight could be changed.
I mean, you know, by all means, you know, go to CCLI, make sure you get yourself a streaming license. You've got the stuff to be legal so that if it ever does end up going into court, you've got a way to show that you're legit. But it's, you know, it's rarely, if ever, going to make it that far. The bottom line is that they just won't let you, you know, they won't let you stream it. And at that point, you're shut down, even though you're doing nothing wrong.
If you go to Christian Copyright Solutions, that's who the conference uses. That's who I use. They're cheaper, and they also include all CCLI.
Good.
They include millions of songs, and they also have a broadcast license. And we pay extra for a broadcast license. So we've been using them for years.
The other one is we use a fair amount of video clips and whatnot that we get from the variety of services. I do make sure that we buy the streaming license when we buy it. I've never had issues with any of those kinds of things. Almost all of my issues are with any secular music or praise and worship music. Occasionally you'll have troubles with some hymns. That's rare. So my traditional service gets way less copyright strikes than my contemporary service does. But I said it's long, and they'll tell you, I mean, in YouTube, they actually, if you go and look at the details, see what it says, and they'll tell you it's not really a strike, and they're not going to stop you doing anything. They just won't let you monetize.
And the broadcast license is the same as the streaming license.
Right.
So. Let's let Amy White Tucker, do you want to give us your story, what you guys have done?
Yeah, we can do that. We started off with an iPad and iPhone, just streaming with that. And I don't know how far into depth to go with all this, Bill, because are people already, is everybody already streaming, or are you looking for setup, or what is it that everybody needs to know about everything? You just want to know what we did.
I would talk about what you guys started out with your iPad program.
Yeah, we started with Switcher Studio, which is a streaming platform that you can use to stream to iPad or to Facebook, but you can only stream to one platform with that. So what we did is the same. We streamed to Facebook, downloaded it, and then uploaded it to YouTube and to our website. So that's how we did with that. Yeah, switcherstudio.com, but that only uses Apple devices. You can only use iPads and iPhones for that. And so, yeah, it's a very simple, easy platform to use. You can set up lower thirds to put your names of your people or your singers, or you can we hooked up to the laptop and ran PowerPoint from there. So it's a very simple platform to use if that's anything that anybody's interested in. We did that. We, Lance made, hang on a sec. Lance made these lovely phone holders with this high-tech device to hold your phone in place, and it just slides into a mic stand. So we didn't even have to have tripods. So that was really easy, very simple, and very economical to do. So that was easy. So we started with that. And now we are using, then we got a gimbal, and that can move your phone around for you, which you can, that's everything was ran off that iPad as the switcher. And then the phones are your cameras. And we had like 3 or 4 phones that were stable, that were, you know, just a set shot. And then we had one on a gimbal that was movable around. So now we are running the ATEM Mini Pro, which is this setup. So you got we have 2 cameras. What all do we have? This takes 3 people to run though. So the switcher you can actually run with 1, or 2 with a laptop. But this one you take somebody with the camera, somebody with the software, the streaming software, and somebody to run the laptop that runs your lyrics, PowerPoints, whatever thing you need up on the screen. It'll run through that.
What are your inputs into your ATEM Mini?
Good question, Bill. We got HDMI with the cables, or with the cameras.
They're all HDMI inputs.
So you got 2 cameras going in. What else do you have going in?
Our sound and the computer.
Okay, so the computer that you're doing lyrics and whatnot on, you're putting that into the ATEM, right?
That's into the ATEM, yes. And then we got the computer to run the software too. So there's
So you got 3, you have 3 video inputs and 1 audio input into your ATEM.
No, there's
Yes.
no. There's 4 video.
We have 3 into it right now.
There are 4 videos, right? There's 4 videos and 2 mic jacks.
So 4 video inputs and 2 mic or sound inputs.
Right, and there's a USB-C, which we are using for a SD card to record our services.
Okay. By the way, this ATEM Mini thing she's talking about, pay particular attention. Okay, this is a relatively new device. It's only been around for about 18 months now. What it can do for the money is phenomenal. All right, and if you want to seriously stream and do this long term, it's a wonderful place to be looking at. An ATEM Mini can handle up to 4 video inputs. As Bill Jacka pointed out, those are all HDMI inputs. Now, when you're in a small church, that's fine. If you're in a bigger church like me, that's terrible. Okay, problem with HDMI cables is 30, maybe 50 feet tops is all you can do. But for smaller churches, that's fine. And she specifically mentioned the ATEM Mini Pro, and the Pro version also does the encoding to do the streaming, which is a very nice feature to have. So you don't have to have a separate computer sitting there running the encoding for the streaming.
We were on one.
That company is called Black Magic, by the way. It's Black Magic ATEM Mini, and then there's also the ATEM Mini Pro.
Half our people can't hear our audio. And I found out that it's because ATEM comes out in stereo, and the older devices can only hear in mono. And I have not yet figured out how to fix that without purchasing more equipment.
I can tell you one way to fix it, but there's a gazillion ways to fix it. We gave up on stereo, and in our case, we use a piece of software to actually stream with called vMix. It solves all kinds of problems. vMix, you can get a free version of it. We started out using the $65 version of it, and I've been at this long enough now, I use the $300 version of it. But it can deal with all of those issues. It also has automatic boosting built within it. So I can have audio sources that are all over the map, and it'll end up bringing them back together. the thing I like the most about it, it is one button to stream.
Is
So-
that, is that a monthly subscription or a yearly or how?
That's a one-time license.
So a one-time license for $65 would be probably what we would need just for
Yeah.
the one.
But it's, but I said it deals with a whole, I mean, by the way, vMix is actually what's used in professional television studios. I was blessed to actually have a guy who, that's what he does for a living, is that kind of stuff. And he's the one that put me onto vMix. It seems a little intimidating to people at first, but boy, it solves a world of problems. By the way, there's $700 and $7,000 versions of it too, but none of us are going there.
So that'll take away the stereo problem.
Yeah, you can, what you do is you just, you go in there and you click that I'm going to do mono. And I can put a mono input into it and it'll stick the mono out to both channels. And
But I have but the HM is stereo. That's my problem. I don't know how to fix that.
say that again, please.
The ATEM output is stereo.
That's correct. And you make the ATEM output be your input into vMix. And at
right.
that point, you make it anything you want to make it.
Okay, I'll figure it out. Anyways, that's what we're using and it does really well because the cameras are very clear. And for those that can hear it, it's really clear, the sounds. And yeah, I've been trying to troubleshoot the sound. So that's.
But last Sunday, okay, we ran streaming with an 8-year-old running video switching, okay? We have put a great deal of effort into getting this so you don't have to be terribly smart to do it, but it scares the living daylights out of people when they first see it. I don't know, I'll share you a picture. That's our streaming setup. And that happens to be the video switch. And I said, last Sunday, an 8-year-old ran the video switch. There's also another person. This, as you can see, this is the computer that's controlling what's up on the screen. And by the way, that's one of the inputs into all of this. And yeah, there's a person that does that because we use PowerPoint very heavily. And we did that long before we were streaming. This is the only part that has anything to do with streaming. This computer, by the way, is running vMix. That's the actual feed out that's going out on the stream. But this is strictly the mixing part. Now, in our case, yeah, we got remote control cameras and all that stuff. And most of you aren't going to be going anywhere near that anytime soon. So.
Well, actually, Jim, they have 2 remote control cameras.
Oh, cool. What do you got?
Ava Pass.
Yeah, I got 8 Ava passes. I love them. I started using them. Then Bill started using them. They are the best value for a remote control camera for the money. I have both versions of it that they have. I'm also using their remote controllers. So when I bought them, they weren't cool, and I was one of the first people to buy them from B&H Photo. And then I gave it a positive review and they took off. So
Yeah,
I did not want to spend the money on PTC optics cameras. They're 2 to 3 times the money.
well, and there are a lot of choices out there with PTZ cameras.
Oh, yeah.
Where the money comes in is when you go to a 20x zoom or a 30x zoom, and then they get to be a little more pricey.
With respect to zoom, okay, most people buy way too much zoom.
Yes.
Okay. I started out in a small room. Okay, the room was 60 foot deep. I just bought 10x zoom cameras. I've never had a problem of having inadequate zoom. I moved over to our big room where I'm 90 feet back. I bought a couple of 20x cameras. I didn't really need them. We could have made done with the 10x cameras. You're not trying to look at somebody's nose, How far do you have to zoom? I mean, I've seen people put 50 times zoom cameras in the back of a sanctuary. I don't want to look at somebody's thumbnail.
Well, where you end up with that, Jim, is where you end up with a salesman who's trying to sell you the most expensive stuff so they
Right.
can get commission. I ran into this at Monroeville, where they had a security company, and two different companies had given them a bid of $9,200 for one camera. One PTZ camera, a switcher, and a controller.
Okay.
Well, for $3,400, they put in two cameras, a switcher, a controller, and all the other necessary stuff.
Well, there are a lot of 10X cameras out there of all types and varieties. And in anything you're going to be doing in any church sanctuary, that's more than enough.
Okay. Thank you, Amy.
Sure.
Bill,
Yeah.
we are about at the time that we had designated for a break. I don't know how much more content you want to run through here.
We could do a break now because we're starting to make that jump.
Okay.
So,
So let's pause and see if there are any questions, because some folks may be jumping off here. And it might actually be worth, because we've ended up with a smaller number than we're registered for tonight. Well, let's see if there's any questions, first of all, about what we've talked about so far. I think I've gotten everything that went into the chat. We'll also let you know that if you look in the chat on Zoom, there's a little box with 3 little dots. If you click on that, you can save the chat. So if you haven't been writing everything down, but you want to save those links, just click on Save Chat, and that will save it to your computer. It will, at the end of the Zoom, will give you the opportunity to see where that document is and move it if you want to put it somewhere else. So you should be able to find the links that way as well. I think for those who have joined us, there's maybe just 1 or 2, but I think Deborah is going to welcome folks and offer a prayer again here in a moment. And then she needs to be on her way to the next thing, and Bill will continue the conversation.
Thank you, Amy. Boy, this has really been a great and wonderful session. Bill and the crew are doing a fantastic job, and I know that conversation will continue. And I want to commend you guys for taking the time to be here, because this is an important conversation, and it's not just our future, it's what we need right now. Amen. And so I applaud you for being here. Let us pray as we begin the second part of this session. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this opportunity. As we look at this period of time of rapid change and uncertainty, technology has never been more important than it is right now. So God, thank you for this gathering. And as we come together, we know we are learning more so that we can do more and be better at what we do for furthering the kingdom of God. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. God bless you.
thank you. Okay, just to get started, I'm going to use my remote phone camera and just show you kind of what we're using at Oakmont, and a couple other pieces that I use privately and for my own stuff. As many of you know, I do, before I even became working for the conference, I've been doing production for almost 40 years. And everything from event production to streaming events to planning events, all that fun stuff. So I've collected a lot of gear over the years, and now some of the stuff, because of the pandemic, I'm already doing 2 high school musicals this year that will be streamed. And who knows what else. But if we can switch to my other, let me, this is our setup. We have 3 AV pass cameras. the A10 mini switcher, the controller for the cameras. I have one laptop that kind of runs the world. The screen is just an extension of the laptop that shows the internal control program for the switcher, which adds functionality to the switcher. Over here is our Pro Presenter setup. We've been running Pro Presenter for, probably, well, basically since it came out. I met the two guys who built Pro Presenter at the annual General Conference 2008, and I've been using it ever since. We have an X32 mixer, audio mixer. They've just come out with a new model called the Edge, which makes this picture look like a real antique, but it serves us pretty well. This is one of my studio cameras that we use. We've used these at the annual conference. The back screen is a 7-inch viewer, so it makes it really easy to see, and you can interchange the lenses. These cameras run $14.95 without a lens. This is another one of, I have two of these. These are my cinema cameras. They have different frame rates than the studio camera does, but you can use them for the same thing. It's got a viewer screen on the back, and all your controls to all your operations are on there. This camera in particular, if you hook it up to an A10 mini, you can control it, everything, color, zoom, everything from the switcher, which makes it very nice. So that's kind of where I'm at. Go back to the other screen. But I've used Blackmagic gear for, oh wow, probably 10 years. And I've been very happy with it. Can't get back to the other screen.
The little thing up top for stop presentation.
Yeah, where? Huh.
Did that help, Bill?
No, we're still on it. Well, let me do this. Let me make this one go away. That didn't help.
Can you just switch to gallery view? Is that?
Okay, there we go. Yeah,
I
okay.
apologize if I did that. I had spotlighted your
Yeah,
other camera so that we could see it.
that's okay. So we just put in the cameras that Oak want. We've been using my studio stuff up until just recently. We did purchase 3 cameras, like I said, and I have them. I don't have them mounted yet because I'm trying to find the exact locations that I want for them. They are 2 of them are 10x, one is 14. And I use that one to get the long shot of the praise band usually, because it's the longest. It's probably about 70 feet. But we've been very pleased with them. They're bright, which is an issue in our sanctuary. It's very dark. We too have had our share of audio issues, which we've kind of worked through as of the last couple of weeks here. But we're very pleased. Jim, you want to tell us what you did? You've got a pretty extensive program going up there.
You mentioned camera placement, and that is, and you're doing the right thing because you got to think it through. you know, that one of the early questions you need to ask yourself is how many different views do you want to have? Okay, you know, one view certainly works, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the truth of the matter is, people are so used to watching productions on television and whatnot, where there might be 20 and 30 cameras. They're used to having all kinds of views. So the first thing that we ended up dealing with was the reality that people don't like to watch you focusing your camera and swinging it around and all that kind of stuff. And that's where a video switcher comes in. You have two different things. You have the preview and you have a program view. The program view is what you're putting out, you know, to the world. The preview is what you're setting up for what your next shot will be. And therefore, the first kind of rule of thumb is if you're going to have kind of wide views of the room, you know, you're probably talking cameras positioned somewhere in the rear of the sanctuary. And the truth of the matter is, it's actually smart to have two, not just one. They don't have to be literally side by side, but they could be. And the reason for that is that, you know, if you're going to change your focus from looking at the pastor standing in the pulpit to looking at the choir or something, I don't know, you can go to your preview, position your camera to where you want that to be, and then you switch over to it. And so by having two cameras towards the back, you always have a way to set up what your next shot's going to be. So the very first thing we realized is, okay, you have to, you know, if you have two cameras somewhere in the back. But then you get all these other interesting things. So what we've ended up doing is we have two cameras in the back of the room, usually one's towards the back corner, one's back center. And then we pick, depending on the way the sun shines in the room. As I said, we've done this multiple places now. So you're always trying to think of where's the sun going to be at in the room on Sunday morning, and make sure that you're aiming your cameras into the sun, because you won't like that. So we usually have one camera off to the side, you know, mounted on one of the side walls. Closer to the front is better than further from the front. And then we've done one other thing that first I thought it was stupid, and now that we've done it, I'm so glad we did. We have one camera that's actually in the front that has the ability to look back. We also learned early on, if the people who ultimately run switching will end up being artsy people, because it really is more of an art form than it is a science. And they'll start doing interesting things. We have a camera in the front in each of our worship spaces, and when we're in an interlude in music, they'll focus in on the hands of the person playing the keyboard or whatever. And you know, so you have things like that. We also have, like when we're doing prayers, we'll have cameras might swing out to look at stained glass windows, or they might look at an altar candle, or who knows what. So camera placement matters. We started out actually thinking of having a 6-camera system as the ultimate. And one of those cameras was going to be a portable camera. That's a whole nother story. So I was looking at an 8-channel switcher. I was going to use a Blackmagic like the one that Bill already has owned for years himself. Those things aren't cheap. I mean, you're looking $2,500 to have one of those things. But along the way, I began to realize, okay, this is all nice. You know, what do you really need? And the conclusion was we could get away with 4 cameras. A portable camera is really nice, but that requires another person to run it. My biggest constraint has been people to operate stuff. So that's why we decided we're going remote control cameras. The cameras Bill just showed you are cameras that require operators. That's wonderful if you have people to do it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when you don't have any of that, you then come up with the pan, tilt, zoom, the remote control cameras. And it was interesting because the fellow I have who does this for a living, I mean, he does ESPN sports broadcast and all that kind of stuff. I mean, he'll have 50 camera mixes complete with trailers and all the other stuff. So he's used to doing stuff on scales churches will never do. In talking with him, he had never used remote control cameras. And I said, this is interesting, because he's used to having whole crews of people. And I said, in churches, our biggest problem is volunteers. So I showed him what one of those was. By the way, he now is starting to use them in his productions as well. Now, in the setup that Bill just showed you, he was using a huddlecam PTZ camera controller. I have one of those too. It's really nice. But a lot of those things, you start getting into issues of how you're going to control the controls. So I think it's camera placement is an important thing to think about. The people at Lance Tucker's church there, sounds like they've got a 2-camera setup. Wonderful thing to have done. And yeah, you're probably projecting lyrics or something up on screen, so that's going to be an input. So you're sitting there, you know, a serious system probably is at least a 3-input system. And I said the ATEM Mini Pro has 4 inputs, therefore it's a phenomenal workhorse for, well, I think most churches. I know I'm actually helping another church at the moment, and that's what we're going to base it off of, something like that. So those are some of the early questions to ask. I guess the other one is going to the very beginnings. You have components to these things. I'll share a diagram with you here for a second, and you know, I'm sorry that it's a bit detailed, but it is what it is. I don't know if I get away with. Don't know if I'm allowed to zoom on this or not, but I don't see any way to do it. But anyhow, you know, you start out with a diagram. In our case, this is a 4-camera system, and so those are all the AvaPass cameras. Okay, this was the original 5-camera system that we didn't do. We didn't do that camera. That's the video switcher. In our case, it's a data video 6-channel switcher. And that's what they call the multi-view that goes with it, that shows you what each of the cameras is inputting, what's coming from the computer running your presentation software. And I said now, and this is the camera controllers. And I said, in our case, we use vMix as to do the encoding, the streaming, the recording. And we also handle overlays, you know, like putting the name of the pastor up or whatever else. That we do all of those with those things. So whatever you're going to do, the first thing to do is start drawing yourself a bit of a block diagram of what you're thinking. Start thinking about the space you have. Bill mentioned about, you know, lighting. Lighting's frequently a problem. All I know is it makes far more sense to add lights to the room than it does to try to buy low light cameras. At the end of the day, if there's no light on what you're trying to look at, you're not going to make up for it ever adequately with the camera. I know the first worship space we did, we actually put a fair amount of money into improving lighting, and was the smartest thing we ever did. These AvaPass cameras, by the way, do pretty well in poor light, but lighting does matter. So I don't know. As I say, we were streaming before the pandemic. We started streaming more as a novelty since we had somebody who knew something about it, and since I'm stupid enough to try things, we started trying it. It had very little following for it. When the pandemic struck, suddenly it became our lifeboat. So we went from, you know, nobody ever watching to everybody watching. And then we had always kind of thought we would add it to our main sanctuary. And I can remember back at the beginning of last year, we'd put something together for it and had a budget. But I really never expected that we would do it, because in our case, we were looking at about $12,500 to do it. And then the pandemic struck, and the reality is, you know, we're broadcasting our contemporary worship service, and most of our people attend our traditional worship service. We said, okay, when we're able to resume the traditional worship service, that's the one we need to broadcast. So last July, we put the system in and started using it. And now our viewership very much mirrors the same percentages as the way the in-person stuff has been for the services. I don't know. I mean, I can talk forever. I think what would be far more useful is if people actually had some questions or what they're thinking, what's in their minds.
Patty has asked a question in the chat, and it might have been good for Laura, but certainly those of you that are still here can answer helpfully as well. The question is, what's the best strategy for a church with only one person willing to use the camera and little funds available? Where do you start?
Well, I can tell you that I was at a church the other day who the cameras come with a handheld remote. So they're thinking that they don't have anybody to run things right now. They don't have any youth. And right now the pastor is thinking about running it from the pulpit with the remote, because the remote allows you to tilt, pan, zoom anywhere you want and do whatever you want with it. So now that to me is a little bit much, but when you don't have anybody willing to.
Yeah, the Avapass comes with an infrared remote that you could certainly, point in the direction of the camera and change things. But the problem is when you're standing up front, you have no idea what it's doing. You can't see it.
But you can set presets.
Oh yes, presets we love presets.
You can do presets and cue them from the remote. But I didn't advise them to do that. I said, fine, it'd be really hard and just a lot of extra stress, I would think, for the pastor to do that. But you would be surprised what I run into at some churches and feelings.
I know I will not cue my own presentation stuff, okay? I used to do that. I quit doing that a long time ago. And I said, fortunately, I usually can use kids to do that. They're totally unintimidated. When you don't have kids, that's a little tough.
Yeah. I'm in that situation where I actually have 2 youth now who are interested. So while they're interested, I'm going to put them to it, because it's primarily been myself and my family running this since we started, and makes it hard.
When people say limited budget, how limited must limited be?
Yeah.
It's always the good question.
You can buy an AV Pass system. Like I said, it's $3,400. I checked on it again. And that includes everything you need except for some Cat 5, Cat 6 cable, which is relatively cheap. That gets you the 2 cameras, that gets you the switcher, that gets you the controller, and all the other internet stuff that you need to hook it up, because you can run control through the network now, and makes it pretty easy.
The system I just put up on the screen was $8,400.
Yeah. Patty, do you guys have a sound system now?
Yeah, but it's very, very minimal. The church is following 213, and we're struggling, but they're trying. And I just came in as a CLM in January 1st, and I'm just trying to boost them up. And that's I have a Tri-City charge, so that's my 3rd of the churches on my circuit, and the other 2 don't have internet, so this one does. And we do have people viewing, but the sound quality is really bad, and but they're doing something. So
What are they using now to stream?
I don't. We upload to YouTube, and then she puts it on Facebook.
Just from a phone or an iPad or something? What are they recording with?
I don't know. She does the recording. I the preaching part, so I'm not technical at all. I know, she just I'd have to ask her.
Okay.
She'll be on the next.
If you get a hold of me, I'll be glad to come up and check out what you're doing and see, where I can help you out. I'm averaging 2 to 3 churches a week at this point. And I'll be glad to do it. I'll put my phone number in the chat. That's the easiest way to get me is my cell number.
Thanks.
I should mention something about cameras. You know, you can go out and just get a camcorder. For instance, you know, we started out, I was using a $200 camcorder. It was a Canon. And the important thing with a camcorder is you have what's called a clean output video.
Right.
So all of the other stuff that shows up on the screens when you normally look at it isn't going to be there. So literally what you're receiving can go out. But I said there's trying to remember. I think it's the 800 series Canon camcorder is probably the least expensive. They'll give you a 1080p output. You know, if you're just going to have one camera, you do that, and the thing that Bill was referring to earlier to actually stream with. I mean, that gets you what the basics. But the key thing is you got to find a way to put audio into it.
Yes.
And if you don't, I guess in reality, on the subject of audio, and we've gone to the point we have actually ambient mics. Okay, there are mics in the room to pick up the sound of the room. You know, when you're in the room, you're used to listening to that. Pastor says something, somebody in the congregation responds, as you're used to hearing it, but you're not going to hear any of that stuff on the screen unless you got a way to pick it up.
Right. We've put in 2 microphones because we've been using the organ a lot. You can't plug, we have a pipe organ. You can't plug that into the soundboard. And
We since we broadcast when we broadcast radio long before all of this. I mean, we're talking commercial radio, not to your parking lot. You know, we have I have $2,000 microphones hanging from the ceiling to be able to pick up the pipe organ. Pipe organs are purely acoustic. But I'm saying that, you know, those are the kinds of things you got to do. You have pipe organs, you want to put it out on your broadcast. You're not going to do that with just a mic sitting in the middle of the room.
No.
Bill, for the very basic things, is Mevo worth mentioning? I know you said folks have moved away from it, but.
Mevo cameras, we have a few churches who are using them. I got on with them as one of their investors when they were originally out, and I got one of their first cameras, and I've never been really overly impressed with it. Basically, it's a cell phone system in a different structure, and they have a little base that you can sit it on that it'll turn and follow you. And you drive it with an iPad, and you could pick shots and zoom into them on your iPad. But personally, I've not had a lot of luck with it. I know Monroeville was using it pretty extensively, and they only use it for meetings now. So, but the Mevo has a pretty good following, and all the different streaming companies, Vimeo and all of them have deals with, if you sign on to a contract, they'll send you one for free. I couldn't get anybody on to talk about it though tonight.
Jim, it looks like you've got some camera information for us there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I shared it with my microphone muted, and I had no way to unmute my microphone while I was sharing. So anyhow, this camera was actually a fellow who had recommended it to me. And as I said, it's extremely inexpensive. I mean, you're only looking at $250. It's a clean output. I use it at the moment for Zoom meetings. I started out using it for streaming, but it works fine. If you're gonna only have one, you can only afford one camera. it ain't a bad camera for $250. You know.
Yeah, be careful. There's a lot of good deals that pop up on Facebook. And most of them are bad deals. Most of them aren't even legit, and they're going to take your credit card information, and you're never going to get the camera that you thought you ordered. But
well, this, by the way, this is B&H Photo, which is probably the best place to buy this kind of stuff from. They're out of New York City. They're probably the biggest online retailer of audio and video equipment. I buy everything from them. I know Bill buys from them. There's all kinds of people who do. And when you don't know what you're doing, you start searching stuff in B&H Photo, you'll find all kinds of things. The other one is you can ask questions at B&H Photo and get all kinds of answers. I mean, I've answered probably 15 questions on this camera since I bought one 2 years ago. And most of them are people struggling trying to stream with it. So, but they're a good place to get stuff.
yeah, primarily I buy all my camera gear through B&H or Marker Tech.
Yeah.
Marker Tech's another good one. The only problem I've run into Marker Tech, they're not good at answering questions. Whereas B&H is.
B&H's tech support's pretty decent. Now, they are a Jewish company, so you have to get used to the idea that they're closed on the Sabbath.
Yep. It's also, if you're ever in New York City, it's a very interesting place to visit. You could spend a day there. They have an amazing system in there.
But what I will tell you is if you're intending to buy it, okay, you will not get a better price anywhere else. I don't care what you do.
No.
So the truth of the matter is, if you know what you want to buy, and it's in that neighborhood of equipment. The other one is, you know, even back during the time at the height of the pandemic when everything from China was frozen, you know, you could work through them. I managed to pull in some cameras that nobody else could get through them. So, but when you start buying high volume, you also get treated a little different there. So,
Yeah. Well, most of the stuff that I bought and helped churches buy has been, most of it Marker Tech. We have a lot of churches that have put the AV pass systems in. That's what I told the guy from Marker Tech. I said, Western Pennsylvania has become a very big investor. But so, and both companies put out extremely good products.
There's one other thing, okay? As I said, you ultimately have to stream somehow. You know, it's one thing to get this video put together. Somehow you've got to encode it into a format and send it off on the internet. Okay, and there are many ways to do that. There are some hardware things that Bill has mentioned. The ATEM Mini Pro, you know, deals with that. You know, the other ways of dealing with it are software solutions. The most common software solution is something called OBS. There's probably more churches streaming using OBS than anything else.
Right.
Okay, I will tell you up front, I've never used it. Okay, but for instance, I know that Kurt Scott at Concord just put in an ATEM Mini Pro, and he is using OBS to stream. But the other software that does the same thing is what I mentioned earlier, vMix. And I'll give you my my reason for plugging it. Obviously, I have no connection to them. You know, when it comes time to the stream, there is a button that says stream, and you push it, and it negotiates the interface. It doesn't matter whether you're streaming to YouTube or Vimeo or Facebook. It negotiates the interface. It goes yellow to and red, and of course red in this world means online. And it happens. I mean, so one of the kids can walk over when it's time to start streaming and touch. In our case, we're using touch screens. Touch the thing and it does it. You don't have to go fetching keys or anything else. I know with OBS, it's not like that. It's not a one button to actually start streaming. It's the same way with recording, okay? There's a button in vMix. When I want to start recording, I push it. And it's recording using whatever settings you've said. In our case, when a service is over, we go in, we rename the file, we upload it to YouTube, we start loading it to a DVD because we also do DVD distribution to people that don't have internet. And we walk away because those things take hours to do, and go home.
Yeah, OBS, it's free. That's the best thing about it. It is
Right.
confusing. It does take a while to get used to, but I've been using something called Live Stream Studio.
Yeah.
Which is, they took OBS and made it simpler. Now, and I have not experienced the software that you're talking about, Jim, but I am going to look into it.
As I said, I've become a big proponent of vMix. Now, there used to be a group called Churches That Live Stream, which was a Facebook group. Unfortunately, a couple of months ago, it suddenly disappeared. There were people from all over the world that were doing this. Once the pandemic hit, it became a zoo. Before the pandemic, it was a fantastic place to get things. But almost every question I had back when we were trying to do it for the first time, I just put it up there and got answers in minutes. I said, unfortunately, they're gone now because there's too many of us trying to do these things now.
A couple of questions have come into the chat. One is about Restream and how Restream compares to the other software packages you've been talking about.
I used Restream for about a month, and it was simple to use. It was cheaper than Vimeo, but I found the audio was horrible. The audio that came out was not good at all.
Yeah, the reason for using Restream would be that you want to go to multiple platforms.
Right.
Okay. And you don't have bandwidth to be able to do multiple platforms. Now, when I mentioned vMix can do up to 4 platforms at once. But again, you have to have adequate bandwidth to do that. I know in our case, we don't consider ourselves to have adequate bandwidth to be able to do more than one at a time. So in a case like that, Restream is a way to do it. And I know any number of churches using Restream. I have never used it myself. We've made the decision that we're streaming to one platform for people who really want to be live, and we'll put it to other platforms for people that are willing to look after the fact. By the way, more than 95% of our traffic is people who want to watch live.
That's good. See, we get a lot of afternoon, evening traffic.
Mm-hmm.
We get more afternoon, evening than we do morning. But yeah,
I'll say one other thing while we're on this subject, and this is a little bit off the beaten path, but please pay no attention to view counts.
Yes.
I don't care what you're on. I don't care if you're on Facebook or YouTube or anything else. View counts are basically meaningless numbers. And I don't want to get into all the reasons for why that's so, but in any of these things, if you have access to either the minutes viewed or the hours viewed, okay, I have found that to be far more realistic relative to what's actually happening out there. So we decided very early on that, we're one of those churches, we use pew pads, people sign in, we keep track of exactly who's there every Sunday. So I said, we've already got our normal people conditioned to that. So when we are streaming, we say, hello to the people at home, and we ask them to go to the comment field and sign in. Now, if you have access to a comment field, that works. Now, if you're watching on certain internet capable TVs and stuff like that, there's no way for you to do it. And there's always going to be some proportion of people like that. But we've done it to the point now, we can correlate, we know, who signed in. And I also know from that I have multiple people watching one screen. And as a result of that, I've found the hours watched actually matches that really well. So I know how many screens signed in and I know how many hours we're watching, and I'm saying, okay, the truth of the matter is that's the useful number and all of that other stuff. And by the way, and yes, I will get people sign in from Africa. Okay, but they do sign in and they've identified themselves and they count. But I'm just saying, please just ignore view count. I mean, I can have 10,000 and I can have 200 from week to week, and it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
But the minutes watched or the hours watched, they're amazingly consistent.
Facebook is notorious because if you just coast by a video,
It counts as a view.
it counts as you watched it.
You know, Facebook does its 3-second view, and of course it has the automatic thing that kicks them on. So just, like I say, ignore it. Don't let it go to your head. When you start seeing yourself, and my little church with 20 people had 200 views. Who cares? It doesn't mean a thing.
Yeah, if you get Vimeo or any of those services, you get access
Yes.
to all those analytics. And it tells
And-
you exactly how many people watched for how long.
And you have access to all of those analytics, both in YouTube and Facebook as well, if you're the administrator. It's all there. I don't know too many people who do it that actually look at that stuff, but we've become fairly proficient at it. But I'm just saying it's part of the realities of this stuff. At the end of the day, by the way, we are in-person worship. That we have 2/3 of our people in person and 1/3 of our people are online. That's been very consistent since last summer. And we have, we have names to go with all of that. But that's because we've been extremely deliberate in that piece. The other one is then I take communion to people who are staying at home, and in talking with them, they really want to be there live. It means a lot to them to be there live. They also want to be able to see who else is there. So occasional crowd shots matter a lot to those people. And again, you're dealing with people that are connected to the congregation. These are not just random people watching. And they're very interested in, number one, being there live. By the way, live isn't live. There's about a 30-second delay between what you're doing and what they get. I get in trouble for that because for children's messages, I'll get kids on the phone that I know are staying at home, and I have to just tell them, stop watching, because I say it's about a 30-second lag between what really shows up at home and what's happening in the room. So.
Couple more questions have popped up in chat. One, Jim, just a reminder of the numbers for bandwidth. Bev said she ran the time test that we did at the very, very beginning of our conversation, and she couldn't remember what the numbers were that you said you should be aiming for.
Oh, and for upload speeds, they'll tell you officially that you need 4 megabits per second to stream 720p. What I will tell you is you really need more than that. And most people, somewhere in the 8 to 9 range will be adequate. I know we happen to have 19 is what we've been getting in our setup. But I know,
was
like
20.
I showed you what my home one is, and it's at 1.5. I mean, I could not stream from here on that. And somebody said they had 20. That's
That was
wonderful.
me. I was the one that asked. It was 20.04.
Yeah, that's you should be
Is
wonderful
that
for
good?
streaming.
Okay.
Yeah,
By the way, I know people that actually try to stream in 4K. Between you and me, it's like, why?
no.
It's like, these are church services. Streaming at 720, you can stream at 360 and it'll actually work. Trying to stream at super high resolutions just takes up tons and tons of bandwidth for very little true gain. I wouldn't waste the time on it.
Yeah, we do everything at 720. What I did was I had a woman in the congregation who has an old iPad, and that's what she watches the service on. Well, she couldn't get it when we first started. Well, we were at 1080 at that point. So I lowered the stream to where she could get it. No one is watching this in 4K.
Right.
It's just, and most people that even have a 4K TV, won't be able to tell the difference anyway. So it's just,
I just know you require tons of bandwidth to deal with the stuff. Just don't bother. As I
No.
say, 720p will be more than adequate. And now we do record at 1080p.
mhm.
And of course, that gives you lots of interesting things. I also told you, I mean, we do make DVDs of the service and we distribute those to people who don't have internet. And we even go so far as to give them DVD players if they don't have those. Of course, as soon as you start recording it at high def, you have to go to double layered DVDs,
Right.
which are slightly more expensive. That was one of the smarter things we did. Once I realized, okay, we recorded all this anyhow. In the old days, we used to make audio cassettes and distribute them to shut-ins. So now we just make DVDs and distribute them to shut-ins and people who are staying at home that don't have internet. And it's become very popular.
We had another question from Jeff, and Jeff, I'll invite you to jump in here. I'll just read it as it is, but it may be easiest if you just have some conversation with Bill.
Do you want me just to ask the question?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
I'm using Zoom because I have a group from the church, and then I feed my Facebook Live from there. And on Sunday, when I went to go live, I got a warning message from Facebook saying that I needed to use, I think it said API or something like that. I didn't have time to test it, but do you know whether Zoom is going to make that change? Have you heard anything about that, or?
I have not heard anything, no. And we use it pretty extensively at the office, you know. We've not, that I know of, gotten any message.
Well, it was just, it was the feed to Facebook Live where Facebook gave me the message. It wasn't from Zoom.
So Facebook is looking for a different. I don't know.
Okay, it came up Sunday morning. You know, I've got a little routine down because I'm the tech guy as well as the pastor. So, I went to 5 minutes before the service started, and I log on from Zoom to Facebook, and I got this message, and I thought, never even thought about it after that until I saw you. I thought maybe you guys, thanks anyway, no problem. I'll figure it out.
Just a very quick Google search, Jeff. It looks like there are a couple of third-party software things that will take Zoom and feed it into API. One of them is called Tray, Tray. I'm not looking at pricing or anything right now, so I can't tell you any further than that. I just see that they come up when I'm Googling.
I will tell you, vMix does that too, by the way.
There we go.
Yeah.
vMix does just about everything. As I said, it's used in professional studios, and I mean, you can have Zoom feeds into it as well as Zoom feeds out to your other streams. I mean, I've done some Zoom conferencing stuff. Now you have an advantage. A smaller church using Zoom for worship actually makes tons of sense. As you get bigger, it just doesn't work anymore. You know.
Well, that's the situation I'm in. I've got 6 people in the sanctuary.
Yeah, and Zoom is perfect. Zoom is perfect for doing worship, you know, when you have probably under 20 people or so. But when you start dealing with 60 or 100 or whatever, it just doesn't work anymore.
Right. Well, and that's I'm the tech guy, and I'm trying to do it. I've got one guy running sound now, but so I'm experimenting tonight with a new camera that will follow me, and it's only a couple $100, and I can use hand signals to change it. But it's, you know. By the way,
Avapass makes a camera that actually has following as well, following capability. I've never used one. But I say what you're doing is you have a target, so as you're walking around and up front, it's going along with you.
Yeah, for $200, it's a pretty amazing camera actually. But Thanks.
That the software, the tray software is running. No, wait, that's something, that's not it. Never mind. Thought I had a price point for it, but
We're a small enough group. Please, if you have additional questions, I think I've covered everything in the chat. Just unmute and go ahead and ask your questions.
yes, please. We've covered a lot of ground. And like I said, if you needed me to come out, I can come out. I kind of evaluate your building and, you know, as far as equipment goes, look at your sound gear. I've been in a lot of churches the last 10 months.
Bill, this is Bev. Will you let me know when you're heading down my way again?
Sure.
Yeah, Christ Church still needs you to come back if you're down this way sometime.
Okay.
I know this much. I would strongly encourage people, try something, you know.
Yeah.
You will find that your people will usually be thankful for an attempt, even if it's not perfect. They're far more interested in finding some way to maintain some connection than they are in this being, you know, NFL's quality or something. So as I say, try something. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, when we first tried it, we did it with some of the youth services and stuff I had before, because the pastor that was here before that retired, he didn't like the idea of streaming. He was against it. So we never really let us do it other than the special services. And we always had people that commented on it and were very excited about it and wanted to know if we were going to do it. But until the pandemic hit, we weren't able to do it. Then once the pandemic hit, it was like, how soon can we do this? So
I do know once you have the capability, it starts opening up things that you never thought about. As I said, the ability to stream funerals, the ability when you're not going to stream to record a funeral and give it to the family, things like that. And you suddenly find yourself, okay, it's no big deal. I can put a stationary camera. I have nobody to run anything. Put a stationary camera out there, turn it on, let it run, turn it off, give it to them. They're happy to have something. So say you develop abilities that you never even realized you would have. I know we decided very early on this
funerals and weddings so far.
Yeah, funerals, weddings. I've done all kinds of meetings. I hate meetings, by the way. They're a lot more complicated, especially when they have to be two-way. But it's, you know, we decided back in March that live streaming was here forever to stay and had nothing to do with the pandemic.
Right.
The pandemic was an excuse, you know, to try to move down the path. And I'm realizing that in particular because of the connections that it's making with some of the older people that hadn't been able to participate in worship for a while. I mean, I've got a 98-year-old woman who's now, we got her a DVD player that's for little kids because she couldn't handle all the other stuff, and she's loving it. Now, so it does give you ways to connect to people that you never thought of. So.
And this is a whole nother topic. I was trying to have Sean Lewis come on tonight from Bethel Park to talk about what they're doing in building a future service from streaming. You know, even after the pandemic is over and we're back to normal, whatever normal will be, they are planning and gearing up to do a totally separate service, which will be different from everything else that they're doing. And I'm thinking that's where we all need to be looking, because we're not going to stop this, because there's going to be people who don't come back to church. There's been a lot of discussion on different sites that I've been on Facebook even that are talking about that. So it's a new outreach. We have people from who are not connected to our church or our town or our state in any way, who are watching our services every week. And I'm sure everybody is finding that. It's a new outreach. So that's kind of the next level. Where are we going from here?
And one thing as a pastor, of course, during the height of the pandemic, I had lots of people who were parishioners from former congregations I'd served that would be watching because there was nothing else available to them. And that all faded away pretty quickly, which I thought was appropriate. But yeah, you do pick up a few people that end up becoming online only. I know my son's church, Dutil, had been doing online services for a really long time and actually had a fairly sizable online congregation. You know, there certainly is some potential that some of that will develop. I know that my own focus, though, has been the name of the game is how do we stay connected with as many of the people we were already connected with.
Right.
And the purpose of this is to allow those connections to continue. I also will tell you that since I'm somebody who's retiring, I'm really glad I'm retiring because doing all of this stuff, somebody else mentioned, you know, when you're the pastor and you have to run upstairs to start the stream to boot, you know, it's just one more thing to do and you didn't really want anything more to do.
Amy, if I can just mention, early on in trying to experiment with getting my speeds right, I was sitting at home one day and testing I'm on Armstrong cable, and that their service has been excellent. I got on the chat and chatted with them, and she said, "I don't think your rates don't look right to me." She did something from the office that almost doubled my rates. So it's worth to get on that chat window and say, "Can you take a look?" And we had just installed the service at the church, and I had sitting here at the house and had her look at that too. And she said, "Oh, wait a minute, I can make an adjustment there too." So that was really beneficial. It may be worth that if your speed check shows low speeds.
Yeah, all internet service providers throttle upload speeds because most people don't do very much of it. So they're trying to focus on having as much download capacity as they can. But almost all of them do have the ability to make adjustments to give you more. And if they know that upload matters to you, they may well do something for you just like they did for you.
Well, thank you all for sharing tonight. There's so much information to take in and a lot of technical detail. Bill has said that he's willing to consult. I know that we have Jim and others in our conference. Some of you may know Brandon Moore, one of our younger pastors, has said he's willing to meet with churches as well, who have some of that tech background and can help you figure out a path forward. Part of tonight's conversation reminded me of our very first week when Jeff St. Clair was with us and really kind of sketched out a vision for what could be as you build community virtually. And one of the things Jeff reminded us of was how important it is to have a team. And I know that team looks different in small settings and larger membership settings. But still, it really is a team effort to make the technology work well, and would encourage you to lean into that as you're thinking about how to do this. We have one more session in this 5-week series. If you signed up for all 5, next week we're going to talk about the numbers. So we are going to talk some about the analytics, how you read those. We're going to talk about very briefly, not extensively, very briefly about online giving options and just kind of wrap up our conversation. We'll note the March 8th conversation about licensing. That's not really part of this 5-week series, but it's certainly relevant. And then I'll also just give you a save the date note in May, Saturday, May 8th. I think I have that date correct. Let me just double check. because I have so many dates floating in my head. Yes, Saturday, May 8th. We are offering a webinar on both and worship, how to lead worship in the sanctuary at the same time that you're being attentive to the folks that are joining online. So that will be a 2-hour webinar that's really intended for you to be able to bring folks to. So invite your congregation members to join in that conversation with you. It'll be from 10 to noon on Saturday morning, May 8th. Registration will be coming out after Easter for that, but you can put it on your calendar if that would be helpful. Thank you all for your time tonight. I will just offer a quick prayer as we exit. Would you go to God with me? God, we are so grateful for your presence with us and the ways that you connect us, that your Spirit connects us one to another, even through the airwaves. And so we pray that all of the information we've shared tonight and the technical pieces, the equipment, the specs, the software, that all of it would be used to bring glory to you and to introduce people to you and to enable us to live more fully and more deeply into that to which you call us. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Remember, if you want to copy that chat as you leave, just click on those 3 little dots in the chat and you'll see the option to save chat. Good night, all.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Bill. Bye, guys.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jim. Thanks, Amy.